So, good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. I'm Becky and I'm one of the Inclusion Support Advisors, and I'm joined by my colleague Kirsty Gibson, who's one of the Inclusion Coordinators.
Hi.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us today for our session, focusing on enhancing strategies for learners with ADHD and autism. So, we've also got Niamh today, who's an apprentice with PwC. And she has lived experience of ADHD, who's kindly volunteered to answer your questions about anything to do with ADHD. So if you've got any questions, just pop them in the chat box and we'll monitor that. So let me introduce you to our wider team. So we've got Amena Dakhil, who's our inclusion coordinator. We've also got Kirsty, who's another inclusion coordinator. And then there's myself, who's the inclusion support advisor. So I'll be your kind of main point of contact when you contact the ALS inbox. And then you'll be in contact with Amena or Kirsty if you have a support plan and have those kind of ongoing support plan reviews.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about common traits and challenges with ADHD. And I think once we've gone through a few, I think, Niamh, it'd be a really good point for you to come in and discuss the challenges that you've faced. So the things that we see more often are inattention, difficulty with organisation, time management, not just in terms of study, but in terms of work as well. So managing time, whether that's being late for something, managing tasks along with time management, particularly when it comes to things like time management for revision and study. We also find that procrastination can be quite difficult, especially in classes or when studying. And we often come across sensory sensitivities as well. So you'll notice on your screen that there are highlighted in a darker blue where these traits and challenges often co-occur with other conditions as well. So with autism as well, you'll often find that sensory sensitivities can be an issue. In terms of ADHD, anything sensory, whether that's noise, lighting, can be a massive distraction when you think about being in a classroom. If it's got bright lights or a flickering light, that can often really put you off and disturb you when you're listening to the teacher. Or with noise sensitivities as well. So thinking about your experiences in exams, for example, thinking about the noise of others typing can be really distracting and put you off your exam. Emotional regulation can often be a difficulty as well, through overstimulation sometimes, and as well hyperactivity and restlessness. So whether that's in your day-to-day life, whether that's in your study, whether that's in your work, these challenges can really have a massive impact. So much so that often we see with such as ADHD and autism, we often see issues around mental health. There are a lot of co-occurring mental health conditions, and that can lead to difficulties with self-esteem as well, and also lead to difficulties with performance and anxiety. So again, thinking about those exams. Niamh, this would be a really good point for you to come in and explain kind of the things that you struggle with personally and the challenges that you've found across your study and your work.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I've got the full bag there, to be honest. Yeah, so I think it was a real shock to the system coming onto the graduate scheme, and kind of balancing that work and study. And it was only really then with work that these things kind of became a bit more intense. And it's because of all the responsibility you have now, right? So my inattention, if I've been given tasks to do, and I'm finding that I can only get one or two done, and it's really impacting then when the team go, well, where did you get up to? And obviously that comparison there to another team member who can get through their tasks. So yeah, it really does come to the forefront in work. I know my time management, I think it's called time blindness. I call it time blindness because when people ask me how long something's going to take, I would say, oh yeah, 10, 15 minutes, and an hour later, I'm still working on it because my perception of time probably isn't aligned to how long it should take and how long it actually takes me. And that kind of feeds into studying as well, because you sit down, you make a revision plan, and it kind of goes to the wayside when you're finding you can't even get through a day of what you plan to do, and never mind a week. So that is really impacted by these kind of challenges you have with ADHD, for sure. And I think it's also going into the work life, and being responsible for like your calendar, getting back to people, all of that compounds on top of one another, and you feel a bit out of control with it. So I know my procrastination definitely comes from initiating a task and seeing it through. And that can be quite difficult at times when, there's hard deadlines and the team's, banking on you to get something done. And I think that's where it kind of flows into the mental health side, where you put a lot of pressure on yourself to go, right, they think I can get this done, I should be able to do it. But your ADHD challenges kind of hinder that process, and then you put more pressure on yourself, and then that can really impact your performance, not just in work, but in your studies as well. So yeah, unfortunately, I think I cover all of them. I've experienced all of them. Some of them more than others. So definitely the organisation and time management, I would say, has been a real learning curve in work and study. And then kind of the inattention and procrastination, I feel like those are kind of outputs when I become really stressed, and they impact my kind of study plan or what I thought I could get done. Yeah, so all challenges there, I think, are applicable to me.
Josephine has highlighted in the chat that, and you've got a good point, Josephine, that with ADHD, you can also hyper-focus on things, which in some cases can be a blessing and can mean that you can hyper-focus on a task, absolute concentration, manage to get that task done, but that's got a negative side too. What's your experience with that, Niamh?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know, and I'm happy to share this, like it has been a feedback point for me in work that in terms of I will get so bogged down in a task and I want to do it perfectly and get it done right that everything else doesn't matter in that moment. And I will spend, I will do overtime and I will spend hours on that to do. Whereas it's just a case of, get it done, get it into review, and someone will come back with feedback on that work. So it is definitely something I've been through, the kind of hypertension, and still do, where, someone, it's almost in work, you need to allow for time to go to a manager or go to someone to kind of make you take a step back, which I found really hard to do, because if you've given me a task list to do, I'm going to get it done whether it takes me 2 hours or 10 hours. But that's not healthy and that's not sustainable in the long term. So the hypertension, yes, you feel great when you've done something and it's taking you all those hours, but actually what's kind of falling off, or what you kind of lose that being able to make things a priority and what is a priority at the time. So it's really hard to pull yourself out of those moments, definitely, for hypertension. And I've just seen below, and you said forgetting to eat. Yeah, like you get lost in it and you look up at the clock and it's been like 4 hours later and you've drained yourself. So, at that point you're like, well, there's no point, I'm just going to go straight to bed. So yeah, it can definitely be a cycle you get into, and it's all about having those people who can kind of pull you back out of that, or someone you can do checkpoints with. But yeah, it is hard. It's definitely difficult when that's a way you've operated for quite a while.
I think as well, Katie's just asked, do you struggle with sensory issues and overload? And if so, what kind of sensory issues affect you? It'd be really good at this point, Niamh, not only to get your view on it, but if others in the chat would be able to share their experiences. I think it helps all of us, not only in the inclusion team, but others with similar sensory issues to understand what each of us has an issue with, because not everybody's issues are the same, but some can have similar themes.
Yeah, definitely. So I know for me, I have to have headphones on to work. I can't, so definitely noises and conversation. So I'll put headphones on to kind of minimize that. And I've, invested in noise cancelling ones as well. And sometimes I don't even turn them on. It's just to have that separation of my space. And that kind of fed into exams as well, where I bought, like loop headphones. So I know they give you the soft ones in the exam, but I was like, I need something I know works for me to kind of cancel everyone out while I kind of have to get in that focus space. So definitely noises for me. And then as well, throughout the day, I feel like lights are quite triggering, especially bright lights, like what's the word for it? Do you know, like the white lights? And I have to take myself to kind of a dark room. And as well, I think sensory as well is those kind of the expectations in work to socialize. I think that kind of feeds in there as well. I can get quite drained through just having conversations throughout the day where I kind of switch off then, and then that can sometimes leak into me becoming a bit more inattentive, or I don't have the energy to perform now. So it's I've got I've got quite a few, but I think definitely the big ones are the noise and having my own space and lights and conversation for me.
Thank you, and I think that's a really good insight. And I've been seeing so many comments come up about the like using the loop earplugs. Absolutely seconded. They are really good. You can still manage to work, but they really take the edge off everything that's happening. So in terms of managing that sensory noise issue in the office, for example, or when you're out and about, they can really help. And I think they're fairly inexpensive. I think they're only about 20 quid. And I know in the grand scheme of things, 20 quid, 20 quid, but if it helps significantly, it's so worth it. I think this would be a really good point, actually, to think about the challenges with autism, because that's not something that we've touched on yet, but there are really similar challenges, although there are some things that are completely different as well. Becky, would you be able to take us through the challenges with autism?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, someone with a diagnosis with autism may have sensitivities to certain sensory inputs, whether that's smell, whether that's visuals, and that can really sort of impact someone in terms of their studies. So that could be within like the exam room setting, and there is like things like sole occupancy rooms available. So as Niamh mentioned, someone with autism may struggle within a group work collaboration, just because there isn't kind of those set social rules and there's expectations that you need to follow, which can be quite difficult to navigate. You can also have difficulties with focus and concentration. If you have difficulties with kind of processing verbal and written instruction, that can lead to that kind of lack of focus and concentration. Also managing change. So someone with autism might have a preference for routine and structure. So if there's kind of that last minute change, that can be hard to navigate. Also, someone with autism may struggle with interpreting social cues, as well as kind of advocating for their needs, particularly in the workplace and also in terms of their study. And later on, we'll have a conversation about ways that you can speak about your needs with Kaplan. So also other difficulties can be self-esteem and mental health. So if you've got those persistent difficulties, then that can lead to kind of negative thought processes, which can really impact on their progress in study, which can also lead to performance anxiety. So things like exam freeze and exam anxiety. So, as Kirsty did with ADHD, could I open up to the chat and just ask anyone else's experiences with autism? Yes, Hannah, yeah, they do. Kaplan do provide headphones. Have we got anyone else that oh, I struggle with having to talk unexpectedly. I've had people not believe that I have autism, but I don't look autistic. Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the misconceptions, that there's kind of a look to autism when actually a lot of those difficulties can be hidden or masked. Having to change desks, yeah, definitely. That idea of kind of hot desking, you know, having that familiarity of like where things are can be really beneficial. You feel you can fall asleep and shut down when you have lots going on. Yeah, definitely. If you know, for someone with autism, if they're masking, that can sort of deplete their energy quite a lot. Walking behind me really throws me off. Yeah, definitely having that personal space. Okay, thank you for your contribution. So we'll move on next to misconceptions. So here are just some misconceptions about autism and ADHD. So you know, all individuals with ADHD and autism have the same difficulties. So you know, in the chat, you've all said that you've had lots of different kind of sensory things. You know, sensory preferences. So we definitely know that that's a misconception. Autism and ADHD are the same. Autism and ADHD are just behavioural issues. So, what I'd like you to do in the chat is think about misconceptions that you've heard about autism and ADHD, and hopefully we can debunk some of those misconceptions.
I think this would be a good time, Niamh, for you to share your own experiences, because I'm sure you've got some of things that either people have asked you or said to you in terms of misconceptions around ADHD.
Yeah, definitely. I think the big one I've heard is, it's not just ADHD, you're just being lazy, because I can't, or I'm unable to have the same kind of work or study output as someone else next to me without ADHD. And obviously just completely wrong and no understanding of it whatsoever. But also it's been a journey for myself, and I think those misconceptions have been there for me from the beginning, and it's over time you kind of learn that actually, oh right, no. So it has been for me also kind of understanding what ADHD means for me also. But yeah, ADHD, it's not ADHD just being lazy. Women don't usually have ADHD. Why can't you just do the work? And that one's a really hard one to kind of rebut when someone says that to you, because you can get into the science of ADHD with them, but actually telling them why you can't do the work, it's a lot more complex than that. So yeah, there's been a few, and I think the ones on screen as well. And it's interesting, the one where it's like have the same difficulties, because my sister has autism, and we are so different in the way we approach studying, in the way we approach work. We are two completely different people. I look at her and I'm like, you've got your life together. Like, oh my, how are you able to sit there, make mind maps, revision plans, actually stick to it? We couldn't be further apart in our approach to things like that. So yeah, I've got lived experiences of the misconceptions as well, but also I'm kind of working through them at the same time, because I'm also learning about ADHD as well as I go along. And also it was, oh, that's another one. Mine was an adult diagnosis. So then from that I heard, oh, well, how do you have ADHD when you should have had it from when you were younger? You can't just get ADHD. And obviously that feeds into the complex discussion about, you know, your performance over the years, and you meet a point where it starts throwing up those kind of traits. And that was in university for me. So yeah, the misconceptions are out there, and it's just all about educating people on the fact, like, it's absolutely not that, and it's just a lack of understanding. But yeah, those are a couple of mine.
I noticed, Josephine, you put in the chat with regard to autism, you can't be good at teamwork. Yeah, absolutely. You know, these are the misconceptions that people have. Oh, well, if you're autistic, you can't be good at this kind of task.
Yeah.
Or if you've got ADHD, you're not going to be able to concentrate for more than 5 minutes. So it's really interesting reading through all of your comments. I can't have ADHD as I'm not bouncing off the walls. That Freya, you put a really good one in, and I've heard this myself. Everyone's got ADHD now, and I've heard that a lot recently, and I see that as a massive positive. Actually, everyone's got ADHD now, although it's a complete misconception because not everybody's got ADHD. However, for me, I see that as a positive because that says to me that more people are recognizing symptoms and challenges within themselves. More people are able to get a diagnosis, although we know the current issues within our own NHS systems with regard to trying to get a diagnosis. But for me, it's about that recognition, people having the knowledge, people having that the knowledge on various different neurodiversities, being accepting of that and being able to think about, actually, perhaps that's me, perhaps I need to look into that a little bit more. So although the misconceptions are negative, what can come out of it can be really positive for
Yeah,
me.
definitely. Ben said that he tried to get an ADHD diagnosis, but they said you must express symptoms before age 12. And we know that someone can mask symptoms up to that point, and it may be things like, study and balancing, study and work that can kind of exacerbate the things like procrastination and kind of lack of focus. So we do see that a lot of learners do get to the point of study at this level and do start to consider whether they have a neurodiverse need. So if that's you, and you definitely reach out to our inclusion team, and we can see how we can help you pursue that diagnosis.
Yeah, and I think Tabitha's brought something up that we come across quite often as well, because a lot of the time, you've got to this point in study, you don't struggle academically, and you've maybe gone through school, college, uni, and not struggled with the content because you're academically really able, and then get to a point where you're finding the challenge of the higher level study because of the level of focus or concentration that you need, or because of the way that the classroom is set up or whatever. It might be that this has only just come to light. And then another thing that someone said, who said that, Megan, you said autism and ADHD are just things that young boys have and not adult women. Again, that I think there has been a lot of work over the past sort of few years in recognizing how autism and ADHD present differently in women to men. So you're right, all these misconceptions that people have, it's really good to kind of get them all out there and not just debunk them, but get your experiences. So thank you. I know we've not managed to get through all of them, but it's been really helpful to get back your feedback.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So we'll talk about strategies for learning and successful study. So, Kirsty, do you want to start with time management?
Yeah, sure. So time management can often be an issue, not just for ADHD, but for autism as well. Many of you may have already heard of the Pomodoro technique. So that is a technique where you study for a shorter period of time, say 20 to 25 minutes, and then have a short period of a break, a 5-minute break, repeat times 4, have a bit of a longer break. Now, sometimes this doesn't work for everybody, and you need to play about and experiment with the amount of time that you can focus. If you're in full hyper focus mode, it can really help that as well, because sometimes it's important to take a break. Like Anya said, you forget to eat, so it's really important to recognize that you might need a break. Equally, trying to balance when you are in full focus mode against when you're struggling to focus. It's about kind of knowing where you're at with things and what's going to work for you. There's also the reverse Pomodoro technique where you study for like 45 to 90 minutes and then have a slightly longer break as well. Niamh, do you use a Pomodoro method, or do you break up your study at all?
I don't use the Pomodoro technique purely because with the way I plan my study, I think it's adding another level of complication, but that's just for me personally in my head. I have to keep it quite simple to be able to make progress. And I think when I tried to add things in, such as the Pomodoro technique, I felt a lot more overwhelmed to kind of stick to it, which obviously you will do, but also like emotionally, I just didn't think it was working for me. So that's one I don't use. Yeah.
Okay. Study plans. Now, I know that you mentioned this earlier, Niamh. Study plans for me, whether that's a loose one, whether that's something that's in an Excel spreadsheet that's color coded, that's all singing, all dancing, some form of study plan will help. Now, I know there's been a lot of discussion around sticking to those plans, which is why I'm saying you don't necessarily have to have a study plan where it's rigid and it expresses the amount of time that you're going to spend on each thing, but at least think about how you're going to break that down. What do you need to study? What areas do you need to look at? And just have that thought process of how am I going to do it as well? What techniques am I going to use to study? What do I need to look at? How many chapters do I need to cover? What areas am I not so confident on that I maybe need to give thought to spending a little bit more time on? There are lots of things that can help you with a study plan. And if you haven't kind of explored the whole ChatGPT AI phenomenon, then the AI technology is amazing at helping you with a study plan if that's an area that you struggle with. Also establishing a routine, whether that be for work or for study, and however rigid or loose that is that works with you, having, especially for study, having some form of routine, however loose or tight, can really help in terms of just making sure that you're doing things, getting everything done. If you're on an apprenticeship, doing the learner journals at a particular time, putting that into your calendar, for example, so that you're doing that on a weekly basis. Setting timers and alarms, not just in terms of your study, but I have got on my phone calendar, outside of my work stuff, but on my phone calendar, I have got notes and alarms for everything. Give the dog a flea tablet, do this at a certain time, ring the doctors. If it's not in my phone and it's not on a notification, honestly, it doesn't get done. So that's kind of my experience of that. Niamh, at this point, is there anything that you can give in terms of guidance on time management?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, it's all kind of an ongoing learning path for me from when I started exams to now, and even now in my final 3 for advanced level, I'm still, and I wasn't aware they did this with Kaplan, I'm still messaging them for help with a study plan. So what I found was it's not, a broken down by AM, PM from them. But what I say to Kaplan is, and the progression advisor is, look, we're here at this point, the exam's on this date, where should I be at the next check-in with you? Where would you like me to be when we have a catch-up, or when the mock exams come round? What should I have covered by then? Because I found that really difficult, especially with the materials, the size of the materials, to plan out what I needed to do. So then if I had someone telling me where I needed to be up to, I felt that took a bit of the stress out to get there. So what I needed to look at by when was kind of handed to me then. And I was like, okay, so you're asking me to be up here. That's a kind of responsibility they've given to me, saying, we want you to be at this point by here. That's my responsibility. And for me, I want to meet that responsibility. I want to meet what they've requested from me. So that took a level of stress out of it. Study plan, and I saw someone put in the chat there, the more detailed you get, the more stressed out you're going to get. So I don't know how many times I write a plan for just one exam, but what I've started to do now is I'll put, say, like, you've got chapters to go through. I'll still make a detailed plan, but I won't put pressure on myself. Say a life event happens, you know, you decided to go out with your friends or something, and you only get through one of 3 chapters you wanted that night. I then don't try and cram. I will still stay on that day until I've done those 3 chapters, and then I'll move on and rejig. Because I felt like if I was so rigid, I'd be working till midnight. Like I just wouldn't have any time. And then you feel almost that kind of upset of not doing what you had originally planned. Whereas now I just kind of move it on a day. And I know in my head eventually I'll get to the end. So, and there'll be a day where less things happen. So I can put, oh, I've finished that one early. I'll drag this chapter into this day today instead. So it's all like on a rolling basis to get through the knowledge. And then a key one, I think, for me for time management and establishing a routine is do what works for you. Don't compare to others who are, you know, may have gone into the office at 9 o'clock and you're trying to get up at 9 o'clock. Like, I am a night owl. You won't see me revising in the morning before work. I just cannot do it. And I went through a period of really trying because I saw my friends doing it and they're the ones passing and they said, oh, it's really working for them. It doesn't work for everyone. You've got your own kind of body clock there, and use it to your advantage to be the most effective. So I will revise after work for a couple of hours, and then I can stretch it because I know I'm a bit of a night owl. I'll stretch it into maybe the later hours on a Saturday, Sunday. My Saturday morning is for me, is to enjoy at least a bit of the weekend. I'm not going to put that pressure on myself to do an all-day session because I'll just be miserable. So definitely don't. Comparison is the thief of joy. Like, do not compare yourself to others in your courses, because I went through that for the longest time. I felt like I fell really far behind, and trying to use their study plans and their kind of routines just didn't help me at all. And it's taken a while to realize that, but I think that is a real key message, is just make sure you're working to you and what works best for you.
Thanks, that's
Definitely
good advice. Thank you, Niamh.
Yeah.
For environment, Becky's going to walk us through environment.
Yeah, definitely. Just before I move on to environment, it sounds like Niamh kind of sets herself realistic and achievable goals. So saying to yourself that I'm going to do a whole day study on Saturday when all my friends are out, that's not going to be realistic. Whereas if you're setting yourself realistic and achievable goals sort of during the week, when you know that your energy level is going to be higher in the morning, that's going to boost your self-esteem when you achieve those goals. So I definitely recommend taking Niamh's approach. So we're on to environment. So what we would recommend is creating a designated study space where you know that when you're in that space, that's your kind of time to focus on your study. Make sure that it's kind of free from any clutter and that you eliminate as many distractions as possible. If you can, try and turn off any notifications on your computer and your phone. But, don't kind of, if you need to answer your phone, you need to text, give yourself that space to do that. Also use like noise cancelling earbuds. I know that we mentioned before about loop headphones. They're quite good because they muffle out the noise as opposed to kind of eliminate it altogether. And there's also white and brown noise playlists. So they can really help because they provide that kind of background noise for you. We'd also recommend using things like sensory tools. So you've got that stimulation and that can help you to kind of maintain focus and manage your need for movement. I know that you can use like a rising desk or things like a walking pad, which I just think are amazing. Which are really good. I think I've come across a chair recently, which is called the ADHD chair, and it allows for movement. So you can put your feet up, you can, just move around really. And then we've also got study techniques. So structure your notes and put the date on, and give the notes a title and section out your page. We'd also recommend like highlighting key information using only 4 to 5 colours. So when you're in the exam, you'll think, well, what was on that blue post-it note and what was on that pink post-it note? So you create that kind of association. We'd also recommend summarising your information using something like ChatGPT, and then you can create flashcards using different colours to sort those different types of information. I'd also recommend using like a visual representation of some of your information. So you can use things like whiteboards. There's also something called like a peel off whiteboard. So you can peel it off and put it on your wall and then create like mind maps and diagrams. And then Kirsty, over to you.
So in terms of thinking about getting organised or having better strategies for organisation, again, like Niamh says, it's about finding your own groove with things. But things that are worth exploring are being more visual with any sort of planning or schedules, because the more visual you are, the less information that you need on something. So you can essentially start to have a nice simple colour coding system that you will then begin to recognise and associate certain colours with certain tasks or activities. So the more visual, the better. But again, with anything that's to do with a schedule or planning, less is more. So the less information that you can put on there or get away with putting on there, the more likely you are to have success with a new planning system. A simple to-do list, whether that's on paper, a lot of people say, I prefer if it's on paper because it means that I can actually cross it off when I've done something, and I can screw the list up and throw it away when I've got to the end of the list. Other people say to me, actually, I prefer it digitally, so that I've got a bit of a digital list on a notes app, or whether it's your notes section in your phone, so that you can just delete them when you're done. There are all sorts of different tools and apps that can really help with things like that, which we'll go on to shortly. Chunking and breaking down tasks. So chunking tasks, thinking about doing the same type of tasks together. Becky touched on when you are most productive. So if you're most productive in the morning, chunk the more challenging tasks together for a morning, so that you've got that energy levels there. You're up for a challenging task, you can manage that, and chunk the quicker, less stressful tasks together when you may find it more challenging in an afternoon, for example. Sending quick emails that will only take a few minutes, making a quick phone call, or things like that you can chunk together, and you know that they're more manageable for you at a certain time. Breaking down tasks as well, rather than them being overwhelmed with that one huge task that's in front of you, that you may then procrastinate and try and avoid doing that task because you're struggling to find that start point. Is breaking it down into smaller, more manageable steps, so that at least you can complete some of those steps and feel like you've made a start on something, rather than avoiding it completely. Again, there's quite a few tools that can help with breaking down tasks. Colour coding, we've mentioned a couple of times in a couple of different guises. Colour coding can help with retaining information. It can help with easy planning. It can help with revision, how you're going to attack revision. It can help with note taking as well. So really think about how could you make colour coding work for you. Keep it simple, 4 or 5 colours, not many more, and think about how could you introduce that into your note taking, introduce it into your planning, and introduce it into your revision for memory. Again, visual aids, mind maps, charts, rather than written out information, can often help with memory, and energy mapping as well. So doing things, like I say, when thinking about mapping when your most active times are and when you're more able to do challenging tasks, can really help too.
Great, thanks, Kirsty. So we've got in the chat some recommendations on loop earplugs, and Ryan's put a great quiz in the chat to say you can take a quiz dependent on what's going to be beneficial to you. So I definitely recommend checking that out. So moving swiftly on. So here's a range of digital tools that we recommend to help with kind of the key areas of time management and organisation. So Kirsty, I don't know if you wanted to start with chatting about Goblin.
Yeah, I mean, we'll keep it short and sweet because I know that we've only got 5 minutes left. But what you can do is then go to the recording afterwards and visit the recording. Or take a picture of this page. If you take a picture on your phone, then you can look into some of these tools. ChatGPT we've touched on can help with all sorts. It can help with planning your study. It can help with reframing information. So if you've got a piece of information that you're not fully understanding and you would want it rewording in a different way, you can put it into ChatGPT and ask it to reframe that in a more ADHD friendly way or a more autistic friendly way. Goblin Tools is another fantastic tool. If you haven't heard of it, which I hadn't, it was a friend that introduced me to Goblin Tools. I don't know how I lived before using it. I use it nearly every day now. Goblin Tools can help with things like breaking tasks down into more manageable chunks. You can put a task in it and it will break it down for you. And then it provides you with a tick list so that you can then tick off the parts of the task as you go in so that you've got a record of where you've got to. Forest, that's an app that can help with study breaks, Pomodoro method and timing. It allows you to grow a tree. Use your calendar as well. Simple things like your work calendar can really help you structure and plan for your day. And think about things like for reading challenges, if you find it difficult to concentrate when you're reading, think about maybe using a screen reading tool so that you can listen to that as well as read it at the same time, because it can really help with focus and concentration.
So we'll move on to the support at Kaplan if you've got a neurodiverse need. So this demonstrates how you can access support. So you'll either disclose that you have a neurodiverse need when you first start Kaplan, and someone will get in contact with you to offer our support. You can also self-refer at any point during your study. So, you know, if you feel that you identify with the characteristics that we've discussed, then put in a self-referral and then we'll get in contact with you. We'd also recommend speaking to your talent coach so they can sort of gain those details from you and then make that direct referral. Usually the referrals are picked up within 3 days at most, and then we can arrange a call with you. So here's just some examples of support that we can provide. So early access to course materials, so you feel like you've got that head start. Advice and guidance on getting a diagnosis. Advice and guidance on strategies and tools. Access to recordings so that you can look back on some of the classroom sessions. And advice and guidance on getting exam access arrangements and which ones are going to be the most beneficial to you.
Thinking about exam access arrangements, if that's not something that you've already considered or got in place, often it can really help having extra time in place for many different reasons. With autism, it's often really difficult to process information, especially in a pressured environment such as an exam. It might be that the extra time helps if you have a diagnosis of ADHD and just allows you that little bit extra time to reread things where you struggle to focus on the whole paragraph, for instance. Also thinking about would it be beneficial to maybe have a stop the clock break so that it allows you just to stop the clock on your exam, have a concentration break, regain your focus and continue. There are all sorts of exam access arrangements that might be suitable for you. And if you're not sure what those might be, please contact us at the ALS inbox and we can always arrange a discussion around what we might think might be the most suitable for you.
Okay, so we've got 1 minute left for Q&A. We have got a feedback survey in the chat that Poppy's put in. So if you've got any feedback, that would be great.
What I will say is if you do have any questions as a result of what we've talked about today, please reach out to us. We're more than happy either to book you in for a call, just to communicate via email. If you want to just email us, that's absolutely fine. Really briefly, what I would really like to do is thank Niamh for joining us today. I think your input's been absolutely invaluable, and getting your viewpoint on everything's been fantastic. So thank you so much, Niamh, for joining us.
No problem at all. It was a pleasure.
Okay.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Becky and Kirsty and Niamh, for taking the time to speak to us today. I've genuinely found this really informative, and I think from the feedback we're getting on the chat panel, everyone has really found it really useful, this session. As Kirsty and Becky have said, please do email them, because I appreciate not everything is, some stuff are sensitive, so you might not want to necessarily ask on this session, and we have obviously run out of time. So please do email them on the Fresh Desk if you need anything else. And please do give us some feedback on the session and anything else you want us to cover in future sessions. All right, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much all.